Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to GBX, and this is NATO's 800,000 troops mobilization against Russia by channel Cappy Army. Another Cappy Army video. Dini made this video in Task and Purpose channel a few months ago. So this is the same plan, but I guess there's more update on it. Yeah, if Cappy is making this video, probably something different is happening. So NATO's plan is to build this 800,000 troops group. If Russia suddenly decides it's not just Ukraine, we're attacking everyone. I think this caution comes from how Hitler did things, right? Hitler was kind of rising up and people yeah, okay, he's just fine. Okay, he's just attacking that place. Oh, by the way, and then Poland started, people started to panic, and then slowly yeah, Belgium, France, it just amped up and people were caught off guard. NATO doesn't want to be that. Right, so NATO has 800,000 troops, they're preparing for that. If it spills out of Ukraine slowly, right? I don't know what's changed, but it's going to be interesting. Let's waste one.
Plan to surge 800,000 troops and 200,000 vehicles to the Eastern Front. The Wall Street Journal got rare access to interview the actual military officers who wrote this plan and the defense companies that are now racing to put it into action. NATO says it's not a war plan, but a plan to prevent war. Meanwhile, Russia says it's proof that the West wants war with them. As a child of divorce, I'm over here just wanting everyone to get along. However, NATO's own estimates place their surge capacity much lower than 800,000, much closer to 200,000 even if US troops were to join in the reinforcements. So why create a contingency plan around that number of 800,000? Because as we'll see, it's a reference to an old Cold War era plan called Reforger that attempted to do something similar and scale up to 800,000 troops. But this new version has a much less catchy name, Plan DEU, or Operational Plan Germany. It's a little different than Reforger. Plan details how if war broke out with Russia, NATO has just 6 months to move the force the size of a small country across the continent. That would mean United States units, German armor, French and Polish mechanized divisions, all rushing east through a handful of narrow choke points and land corridors that planners consider the alliance's lifeline in a crisis. But buried in the plan deep are 5 major vulnerabilities, including choke points, infrastructure gaps, and readiness problems that need to be addressed. If you're a NATO logistics planner, the first thing you're worried about is protecting your data, and this video's sponsor, Delete Me, takes care of all of that. I was getting a ton of scam calls before, unless I really was.
Yeah, we all know that internet browser. Yeah, people go to original video page and from there support this channel.
Back to the episode. But if this plan is so top secret, how does some random defense tuber in New Jersey know about it? Because the existence of the plan isn't what's secret. It actually has its own public page on the German army's website. The NATO alliance wants some parts of Plan DEU, this classified plan, to be known to the public and their adversaries as a deterrent. So they purposefully leak some breadcrumbs of details for us to piece together. But Plan DEU isn't some brand new idea pulled out of some second lieutenant's ass. It's the modern descendant of a Cold War era plan called Operation Reforger, which stands for Return of Forces to Germany. It was this full-scale demonstration attempting to—
All right, I get it. They're deliberately giving out this detail as a deterrent. But I guess they didn't give out detail of all the logistical problems they have. The one Cappy was talking about here. So as soon as yeah, we're going to put out details as a deterrent, and then that plan leaks, oh fuck. We didn't want Russia to know all these problems.
To prove the United States could really surge massive combat reinforcements into Western Europe fast enough to stop a Soviet offensive, which at the time was about 1.5 million soldiers worth. Plan DEU keeps the spirit of Reforger but updates it for a battlefield that's far more dangerous today. Instead of worrying about Soviet tank armies and massed artillery, planners now have to factor in precision missiles, swarms of attack drones, and cyber attacks. Wow, war's gotten pretty gay, not in the good way where two guys are smooching on the lips. And the geography has changed completely since the last battle lines in the early 1990s. The old Iron Curtain front ran roughly 400 miles from the Baltic Sea through Germany to the Alps. Today's defensive lines stretch over 2,000 miles from Finland through the Baltics and Poland all the way down to Romania. So many places to possibly attack or not attack, but what all that means is NATO supply lines now have to reach more than 750 miles from Germany Germany to Estonia. This is an order of magnitude more distance than resupply needed to go in the Cold War era. The sequel always has to be bigger and better. But while Operation Reforger is about reinforcing just this narrow gateway, this 400-mile folded gap here, Plan DEU, on the other hand, is about reinforcing a region.
Yeah, sequel being greater and just greater. I don't want to say better, just greater. It's so true. Look at World War II. Yeah, much bigger.
The size of a continent. A logistician's worst nightmare or fantasy if they're into that kind of thing. The roots of the entire NATO plan are from the 1961 Berlin crisis. Overnight, East German troops sealed the border between East and West Berlin and began constructing a wall. To the west, it looked like the Soviets were testing whether they could choke off access to the city entirely. So President Kennedy responded by sending a fully armed US Army battle group down the highway into Berlin. As he put it, the deployment was, quote, to prevent a war, not to fight one. Sound familiar? History rhymes or some shit? But the crisis exposed a terrifying reality. If war actually did break out, the United States couldn't get troops, let alone tanks and heavy equipment, into Europe fast enough to make a real difference. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union already had 1.4 million soldiers and thousands of armored vehicles positioned just minutes away from the front line. NATO's forward defenses were outmatched, and everyone knew it at the time. It was a little-known general named Bruce C. Clark that was instrumental here. He was the hard-charging commander, chief of US Army Europe, who quietly sketched out the idea that would become the backbone of NATO's entire reinforcement strategy all the way to Plan DEU today.
Welcome to the United States Army in Europe. For 40 years, this band has been my vocation and avocation.
Clark came out of World War II with a reputation as a brutally efficient, logistics-obsessed armored commander. He was a lethal man in the tank and a tactician in the sheets. Clark's solution to the Berlin crisis was something radical for the era called POMCUS, which was short for prepositioning of material configured in unit sets. Clark and Army planners proposed parking thousands of US tanks, vehicles, and artillery pieces in Europe ahead of time, and that's what POMCUS was.
There you go. Yeah. How to transport? What if we pull what's that you know that movie Alien, Tom Cruise movie, I forget. I just said the name. Yeah, War of the Worlds, right? H.G. Wells, that one. What if we pull that shit? What if the aliens are already there underground? In this case, it's tanks. That just makes sense.
It would be fully maintained, fully fueled, and ready to rock and roll the moment American troops arrived by air. At the time, many logisticians hated the idea though. It wasn't obvious that the plan would work. There were a ton of red tape and problems to solve for including where they would be based, how the system would work, and for all they knew, the tanks were going to get stolen and joyridden across the Autobahn. It meant leaving billions of dollars worth of heavy armored equipment in Europe, separated from the soldiers who would actually use it. It broke from the time-tested Army's sacred tradition of units owning their own gear and naming them after girls they swear they hooked up with once. Clark launched POMCUS in 1962, and the storage sites were strategically located far enough west of the Rhine that they wouldn't be overrun within the first 14 days of a conflict with the Warsaw Pact. In 1965, when the US Army started pouring troops into Vietnam, President Johnson announced he was pulling 2 divisions out of Europe. This reduced the number of US troops from 500,000 down to 300,000 on the continent. Johnson ordered the expansion of POMCUS to 18 storage sites across 4 different countries that housed more than 3 divisions worth of armor forward deployed. It was a kind of have your cake in Vietnam and eat it in Europe too sort of situation. In 1969, NATO launched Operation Reforger to test this concept of these ghost battalions to see if they could actually work. At its height, over 125,000 US troops were flown into Europe, and they signed out their tanks and trucks from warehouses using barcodes.
Today in Lionheart, some 160 M1 Abrams tanks drawn from pre-positioned stocks here in Europe are pushing westward on the southern front of the battle area.
It's the military equivalent of having your name ready at the wedding table so you can just...
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I understand how development takes a long time, but seeing that old timey footage talking about M1 Abrams, and that's the main battle tank of America. Like how slow, like Russia uses even older tanks. Yeah, military tech, right, takes a long ass time. I'm pretty sure, is that a replacement of M1 Abrams? Like US is making other tanks, but I'm pretty sure it's probably underway, but still.
sit down and have steak. This was the backbone of NATO deterrence against the Warsaw Pact for over 2 decades. It was seen as a monumental logistic success, being able to surge 6 full divisions, ultimately 1 million soldiers. Many troops who participated in these plans felt that they had done their part to help win the Cold War, and to do it without even having to fire a single shot in anger. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, these plans were unwound. By 1993, Exercise Reforger was cancelled, there was peace in our time, and we all got along, and we lived happily ever after, and history was over, and no one ever complained ever again. Except that didn't happen. The security picture got worse. It got way worse. Today, the United States has far less troops stationed in Europe, between 70 to 100,000. European countries' armies have been reduced in many cases by more than 50% from their Cold War standing. US military planners are once again considering reducing troop numbers in Europe to focus elsewhere. And so Operation Reform...
Look, man, I'm not gonna lie, it surprises me that Europe actually does that. I think it's reliance on America. NATO is mostly America, let's be honest. And I think Europe's reliance on America, like, they just reduce their army thinking American troops will just be there, which is, I don't think it's fair. America's recently like, okay, why are we wasting our time there? Like, let them pull their weight off type of way. And that's fair. Like, why would America, like, you know, like, take everything on the shoulder all the time, right? I saw the NATO's, like, spending budget, and Germany wasn't even at the top. Germany is the 3rd biggest economy. Are you kidding me? Compared to your GDP, America was spending a lot. Germany was not, which kind of, like, surprised me. You know, when shit like this happened with Russia, like, yeah, I guess, like, build your own. This is why Poland is, like, investing. Germany is now investing. Yeah, future, like, they're just going to invest in military themselves. But reliance on USA, like, there's a problem with that, because, like the video says, logistical issues. America, you know, like, putting troops there, okay, great. But if they remove it, bringing the troops back is going to have a problem. So America is not in Europe. But if Europe themselves have their own standing military, this is not a problem at that scale.
Forger is being resurrected today as Plan DEU, with roughly the same goal of surging a similar amount of forces. It revolves around 9 designated land corridors that are pre-planned military highways and rail routes that run to the Eastern Frontline nations. While Reforger was primarily an American-led effort, this one...
Why is Austria not part of NATO? Huh? I didn't know that. Switzerland makes sense. Why is Austria not?
Will be led by Europe. 10 of Germany's high-ranking officers were put in charge of writing this plan up 2.5 years ago in 2023. The draft was reportedly created shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, when they determined that they needed to return to this Cold War footing. In 2024, the plan began to be implemented on the ground by soldiers. Nils Schmid, Germany's deputy defense minister, said that they had to consult with troops from Reforger, saying, quote, "We must relearn what was unlearned. We have to drag people back from retirement to tell us how we did it back then."
We must relearn what we unlearned. I don't know why it just feels like that can't be grammatically correct.
I'm getting too old for this shit. A 7-page unclassified version of Plan DEU is available from the German army online. The German officers outlined how Germany now sees its role in the alliance as a transit hub, where they're responsible for protecting, running traffic management, transporting by road, rail, and sea. Plan DEU accounts for where troops will sleep, eat, and refuel, where they conduct maintenance, and get medical care. Much like Reforger, this new plan maps out all the ports and roads that need to be traveled. But a lot has changed since the Reforger days. One of the critical vulnerabilities is the possible shortage of labor supply, because 70% of the truck drivers in Germany are foreign-born non-nationals who may leave. There's the possibility of sabotage along unmonitored rail lines.
Anywhere in Europe during a conflict could be a target for an adversary. Our job is to make sure that nowhere in Europe is a target for any adversary.
And the other challenge is bureaucracy, because a number of peacetime laws restrict military convoys and where you can have drone defense, because it wouldn't be an plan without tons of unnecessary red tape and bureaucracy to cut through. We've got invented...
I didn't even thought of that shit. Oh God, Europe. Imagine all the shit breaks out and like American troops are there and all the fucking red tape and all the European things, all rules and regulations, and Americans just looking around. Are you fucking kidding me right now? What is this happening? Yeah, it's literally like a swamp you have to cross through. Yeah.
Long-range heat-seeking missiles, but nothing can destroy a TPS report. Plan DEU has to account for the fact that there's only one major highway that runs from Poland into the Baltic states. Only one of the Baltic countries is directly connected to the rest of NATO, which is Lithuania. Estonia and Latvia are cut off with their backs to the sea. And during the Cold War, NATO only had one country.
Most riskiest of all.
Latvia are cut off with their.
Because this is Russia, right? As far as I know, like part of Russia, like all right. Belarus basically Russia at this point. Allies, why not? If they can just bridge this gap and they just cut off from Europe, that's some next level shit.
Their backs to the sea. And during the Cold War, NATO only had one country to coordinate through on the front, which was West Germany. The Soviets also only had two countries along the front. Reinforcing and supplying today's dividing line is much more difficult for armies on either side because the locations for possible conflict are far more numerous. It means sustaining a credible deterrent, a giant standing army, for either side of this dividing line is far more expensive. Much like Reforger over 50 years earlier, the goal
or hear me out, or just point blank give out warning. Like just red line. If you do this shit, I'll nuke you. I don't care. And if they start to cross that line saying like, I dare you, do something. I don't know, throw a tactical nuke at an empty place or something. Just as a warning shot. Small tactical nuke. That doesn't really destroy anything, but it's a warning. Like, yeah, we're going to use this. You have it, we have it. We told you this is a red line. Because this is fucking ridiculous. You can't have a big standing army. The bigger issue is if you have standing army, what are they supposed to do? That mentality, if you're in wartime economy, war is all you do. If you're a big ass soldier, people start to get ideas like, why are we wasting money in this and we should get something back in return? What is inevitable at that point? Because thinking starts to become that. You don't want big armies standing at the border. What are you, high? There has to be a deterrent if the threat is rising, which I don't know if threat is rising. Is there indication Russia might attack Europe? They're barely fighting Ukraine right now. I don't know.
The new plan is being stated as being able to prove NATO can credibly reinforce the Baltic states and Eastern Europe in the event of conflict with Russia. But can they? Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany are reviving an old Iron Rhine World War II era rail line to help the flow of weapons. The project is emblematic, I think, of the challenges facing Plan DEU though, because it's been stalled by disputes over issues such as environment.
Rail line is not really efficient in modern world where like precision missiles are a thing. They can just blow up the fucking rail line. What you gonna do then? It's not like a road, like will they just take a detour if road is broken? Or like trucks will go off-road a bit or something. Trains can't do that. This shit doesn't work in modern world. I don't think so.
Environmental concerns. Saving the whales may have to wait until after the war. But there are stronger aspects to the plan. Those old Pomka storage sites from the Reforger era, they still exist, but they've been renamed Army Prepositioned Stocks or APS. General Bruce C. Clark's legacy lives on. These sites have now been expanded and run from the Netherlands to Germany to as far east as Poland, where they have multiple stockpiles, and each of the APS-2 sites are capable of housing an entire armored combat brigade team, and they are now climate-controlled guarded warehouses. But according to an Army report, one of the challenges is the new equipment like the infantry squad vehicle and attack drones for the US Army have not been integrated into this pre-positioned system. It demands constant contractor and soldier maintenance so that it can be a fight tonight status. However, you don't need to be an OSINT guru to know that today's APS sites are easy to identify on Google Maps and are now quick targets, prime targets for missiles. The furthest east and most exposed one of these sites is the new Pałdysz complex in Poland, and has a state-of-the-art hardened structures though. It's 650 acres large, with 50 climate-controlled hardened vehicle warehouses, with earth berms around it for protection and thick concrete. In case this wasn't enough doom scrolling for you, as part of the plan, Germany is now restoring from the network of some 2,000 Cold War era bunkers, many of which were mothballed, but will now be revived to protect civilians from bombings. Because Because today's Plan DEU exists in a different threat environment than the Cold War, drone surveillance will lock onto any large troop movements as they go.
Yeah, but what about gravity bombs? What about chemical warfare? But see, people say like, oh, these are all like Geneva Convention, don't do that. Yeah, that only applies as far as war doesn't break out. Once all out war breaks out, nobody cares about any of that. It's now or never. People will just use that shit. So yeah, I didn't. Okay, this is just preparation, I get it, but I don't see things going this extreme. If you have to house people inside bunker because shit has hit the fan that bad, I think nukes are coming. So that's a bigger issue than people realize.
Further east, and so there's a need to disperse while traveling east because the supply lines are so long. This creates an emerging problem that the war planners have run into. There's not enough rest stops along the route that aren't giant targets. Stopping at Buc-ee's isn't an option. The defense company Rheinmetall was ordered to find a solution to this, so they created the capability for small overnight field camps. Rheinmetall has developed the same technology that Burning Man has had for years, but with far less ecstasy. These small distributed bases house 500 soldiers, about half a battalion, with showers, gas stations, a field kitchen, and they even have drone surveillance overhead. The camps come with armed guards that have been screened according to this report to make sure that they don't have any connections to Russia or China. Listen, it's not racist to want my guards to not...
Okay. I like a no connection to Russia and that same frame Xi Jinping was stepping away from Putin. That shit is next level. Look.
Don't have any connections to Russia or China. Listen, it's not racist to want my guards to not have connections to the MSS in China, right? This suggests something interesting though. NATO is planning to use civilian contractors and private security for some of these functions. It took 2 weeks to set the field camp up and a week to tear it down. This makes logistics en route smaller targets compared to the large headquarters with thousands of troops that had been planned in the past. This is part of an over $250 million deal for Rheinmetall to resupply NATO along this route. A representative from Rheinmetall's logistics business said to the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Picture building a small town from nothing and dismantling it in just a few days," end quote. Sounds like you wouldn't be living in luxury. It's like the Command and Conquer barracks that you'd be spawning out of. But here's where it gets spooky, you guys. We just started seeing reports in August 2025 from local investigative media outlets in Germany that reported that high-ranking German officials from the military had been making visits to local mayors and district administrators and smaller cities, basically saying, not trying to alarm you guys, but World War III might be coming and we need you to plan on how you guys are going to cooperate with us as civilians with the military. During the Cold War, NATO accused the Warsaw Pact of preparing for an attack.
I mean, it could be just... Germany is known to over-engineer, and core of that is some level of OCD. Probably this is just German OCD. Okay, there might be war, so let's just prepare all the fucking way. This could be one of those things, I don't know.
And the Warsaw Pact accused NATO of escalation themselves. Some things never change. The same is true today. German officials believe that Moscow will be ready to conduct an attack on NATO by 2029 or sooner. They point to a series of dozens of arson and sabotage attacks conducted on the ground in Europe and an increasing number of airspace violations by Russian attack drones and fighter aircraft that have changed their calculations. Planners in Europe state that they believe once a ceasefire is reached in Ukraine, it could free up Russian resources to conduct increased sabotage attacks in the Baltics. The Russian foreign minister, on the other hand, denies they had any hand in these incidents, saying who me couldn't be. One of the earliest...
Look, man, it is true that Russia is in wartime economy, just starting basically. When it comes to war, like it's just barely starting past 2 or so years, right? If Ukraine thing stretches out 1 or 2 more years, Russia becomes more efficient in wartime economy, infrastructure and everything, building soldiers, conscripts. And if Ukraine deal does pass through and Ukraine war stops, they are free. And usually times like that, they look for other objectives. It is possibilities. So I don't know. Again, like you need to be extremely hard. Like if you cross this line, we're not gonna back off. Like this is happening. It's not some war. It's not gonna be like World War III where we bring million troops. No, I'm gonna throw a bomb at you because like shit happen. There's a reason Cold War was cold because we all have nukes. Let's not forget that. There has to be warning shots like that. Otherwise, this is just back to what it was before World War II. Just constant wars and everything gets destroyed all the time.
authors of the plan, who is a senior military officer in Germany, spoke to the Wall Street Journal, and he said, quote, "The goal is to prevent war by making it clear to our enemies that if they attack us, they won't be successful." Is that deterrence established yet? During a test run of Plan DEU, they learned a number of challenges. Heavy armored vehicles couldn't handle some of the parking locations, choke points were a major problem. The rail line over the Hunt River is actually the only port in Northern Europe that is licensed to handle munition shipments to Ukraine, so an accident there in 2024 totally stopped weapon supplies for weeks.
No shit.
It took 2 months to build a temporary new bridge then. Big oof. The construction of the A44 highway in Germany was built with dual military purpose in mind. Many sections are built as emergency landing strips for gigantic C-130 cars.
Dude, entire Autobahn is that. That's why American interstate system is the same. Like, you can land planes on it, tanks can pass through and road will be fine, right? So Germany is one of the unique countries who doesn't have that problem.
Cargo aircraft to land as a kind of makeshift runway. Fuel tanks are actually buried deep under these parking areas. All it takes is a quick snap of the guardrails, and mobile air traffic towers can be set up in minutes. But the newer routes as you go further east in Germany and Poland aren't built with war in mind. The tunnels and bridges are too narrow or can't support the weight of tanks or convoys. Nothing is more embarrassing in the military than collapsing a bridge with your tank. It's a huge party foul. This is part of the reason why Germany is investing over $170 billion on infrastructure by 2029 to improve these dual-use infrastructure. And one part of
So it will be here before GTA 6. That's what they're saying. 2029. Yeah.
Plan DEU is not being released publicly is the location of where these choke points actually are. According to the Wall Street Journal, Plan DEU is kept on the military's air-gapped red network, quote unquote. Air gap is a lot like a thigh gap. It means that it has no connection to the other side, so internet hackers would have more difficulty stealing the sensitive part.
What's with Cappy here? Like, he's really unleashed with jokes. Like, he's just left and right. All right.
Parts of the plan. But it gets spookier. Along this route, German army officials have been making visits in person, briefing hospital staff to prepare for a major influx of war casualties. I noticed these reports started surfacing in September in France when a leaked government letter from the health ministry told hospitals to prepare for a major military engagement by March 2026. The letter warned that they needed infrastructure to accommodate between 10,000 to 50,000 wounded soldiers that were expected to be treated there over a period of just 6 months. Plan DEU is focused on a concept that's called whole of society. You hear this term all the time, all over the place, but what does it actually mean? It's a concept forgotten about since World War II. It's the idea that civilian companies, hospitals, private individuals,
Makes sense. Government, army, weapon manufacturer, education, media, police, public space. Okay.
organizations outside the military need to have a plan to help serve the country's military. It's the combination of civil assets into military planning. Defense capabilities are now integrated with private industry and logistics firms into a unified wartime structure. It's great for defense company stocks. The civil sectors like police and disaster relief agencies are now
not for national good, it's for that. Yeah, there you go.
Now being looped into this Plan DEU because they have to account for the flow of people and prisoners and refugees. There's going to be thousands of civilians who are fleeing the war with their refugee flow plan. Today, Red Storm Bravo is the exercise that's much like the old predecessor Reforger. It's a modern day dress rehearsal, testing the cooperation between civilian and military to move enormous amounts of troops and equipment east across multiple countries that are not under one authority. It's the military equivalent of herding cats, armed cats. The legacy of Operation Reforger reveals what Plan Germany is going for. Declassified top-secret CIA documents from the time and interviews later with former Soviet officers revealed that they were closely monitoring Operation Reforger in the Cold War, and they believed that it was a major threat. So in some ways it did.
I mean, yeah. You ask a kid and that he would tell you, yeah, this is a major threat. What is even that?
did its job. The experiment would end up becoming the foundation of modern US power projection. Variations of POMCUS now exist everywhere that the United States expects to possibly fight, from the Persian Gulf to the Pacific. Plan DEU is NATO trying to relearn a simple lesson from the Cold War: deterrence only works if you can prove you can credibly move faster than the crisis. If you like this episode,
I feel like this, I don't know, this is just like conspiracy guy in me. But to me, it feels like this is just smoke and mirror. Real plan would be something different. No way they're just gonna go like, yeah, Cold War. Remember we did that 800,000 thing? Yeah, we're gonna do that again. We're gonna tell people we're gonna do that again. To me, it feels like a cunning person could like walk around that. And it's much easier to like deter or, like strategize in advance. So this doesn't stay much. So to me, it feels like weird that like they would just say that and like give out this plan. They must have some other plan that they're not telling anyone. This is just a plan that they're showing Russia that we might do. So this way you can have two things. First of all, you know how Russia will react because Russia is thinking this is your plan. So they can plan based on that. But also at the same time, they might assume that Russia knows that this might be smoke and mirror. Yeah, this is like 4D chess at this level. I don't know. To me, it feels like it must be that. Because no way when it comes to military, shit is this simple. It can't be. Right, well, if you like my recent, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.